Tonight's concepts are going to be regarding genetics and kind of how traits are passed on, a little bit of vocabulary review, not so much Punnett squares. We'll do some work with Punnett squares, but the assumption will be that regular old monohybrid Punnett square is not an issue for you. So if you are not comfortable with those from your freshman year, you need to be planning to come in so that we can work on those. Okay, so we've been hinting at this a little bit as we've moved through this evolutionary concept that we'll get to. But the fact that shared and conserved in certain processes and features, that those are going to support the concept of common ancestry. And so we're going to tie this into genetics a little bit right now. So we've got processes and features that exist on lots of levels of life. In all different ways. So looking first at genetics. So genetically, DNA and RNA are carriers of genetic information. So pretty much all forms of life that exist, from a bacterial cell to a human, all forms of life use one, if not both, to house and share the genetic information. Okay, so this concept of DNA and RNA being our carriers of genetic information, that is universal to all organisms. On the cellular level, a ribosome, if we remember, a ribosome is where protein synthesis occurs. It's what actually is going to make the protein from the genetic information. And so all organisms, all walks of life are going to have ribosomes. Bacteria have ribosomes, sea anemones have ribosomes, flowers have ribosomes. And on the molecular level, the genetic code is what we call universal. And this is a concept that we talked about your freshman year, that all forms of modern life, they have the same features, like they have the exact same nitrogen bases, A, T, C, and G for DNA. So they have the same nitrogen bases, and then those bases are grouped into groups of threes, codons in particular on amino acids. And remember our codons, like for example, A, U, G, whatever that codes for in humans, it also codes for in bacteria. So we have that universal genetic code. And so then evolutionary-wise, some of our core metabolic pathways or processes, glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm, taking that glucose and breaking it down to pyruvate. The Krebs cycle, electron transport chains, these are conserved. And what it means by conserved, basically it means that you're going to find them across all of the domains. You're going to see these processes occurring. And so again, that's going to set up this link to common ancestry, that basically all organisms have used the same means to release and store energy. And so the genes that code for those pathways have to exist, and they have to have been passed on. And so this again is showing that link for common ancestry. Okay, so let's take a look at the monk who was considered kind of the father of genetics, Gregor Mendel. So he was a monk and he studied pea plants. In particular, he focused on 7 traits within the plant, and he kept really good records and about his observations and what he saw happening with these pea plants. And so what he always did is he took what is called true breeding. So this first generation here were true breeding. And by true breeding, we mean they were homozygous. Again, this is vocabulary, hopefully, that we remember. So that first generation was homozygous or true breeding parents. And so that's the P generation. And you can see, so there's a white one and a purple one. And so both of those would be true breeding or homozygous for their particular phenotype if we're looking at color. So he would then collect seeds from their babies. And then those F1 babies, so those babies, he would then cross and grow those. And then he would make note of the F2 generation, and he would allow that generation to self-pollinate, and he would observe what was happening there. And so when you see this parental F1, F2, this all comes from Mendel's studies and his experiments. I have the parent generation, the first filial generation, and the second filial generation. The parent generation was always 2 true breeding homozygous, which is going to result in heterozygous ones for the F1, and then the F1, they self-pollinate, so 2 heterozygotes cross to form the F2 generation. So Mendel's research helped us to find certain pieces of information, obviously. So one of which was the discovery of alleles. So alleles are alternate versions of the same gene. Remember, a gene is a chunk of the DNA that codes for one particular protein. Okay, so the gene codes for one particular protein. And so alleles are different versions of that same gene. So you can see in the picture here, they're looking at the gene right here, and this is a different allele for that gene. Okay, that locus has a different allele. And so those alleles are going to vary based off of the DNA sequence. Okay, and this is part of why we are what are considered diploid organisms. Remember, diploid, I have pairs of chromosomes. So what that does is it allows for if you get a bad copy, that the other one usually takes over for it. So with dominant alleles, those code for a functional protein. And as a general rule, they're going to mask other versions of the gene. So they're going to mask other alleles. And then the recessive allele actually codes for a malfunctioning, and that's say protein. I know it's buried behind the picture there. Codes for a malfunctioning protein. And the vast majority of the time, it doesn't matter. The dominant one makes enough for, can overcome the fact that you have this recessive allele. That's why most diseases and disorders are recessive genotypes. And so you have to get both of them to actually get the disease or disorder. So the combinations of these alleles are going to determine an organism's both genotype and phenotype. Okay, so this is again vocabulary from freshman year. Remember, the genotype are the actual alleles. Am I homozygous dominant? So big A, or in our example here, big P. Am I heterozygous? Do I have one of each? Remember, hetero is different or other. So do I have different alleles? Big P, big A, little a. Or am I homozygous recessive? Again, homo is man are the same. So I have two of the same alleles there, but this time they're both recessive alleles. So the genotype is going to be what's actually in the DNA, where the phenotype is going to be what is that coding for? What is the physical appearance, and has it been changed or has it been altered? So Mendel generated some laws, and the first one that he did was the law of segregation. And when he was doing this, he was looking at just one particular trait for this particular law, the law of segregation. And so what he noticed is that during meiosis, these alleles are going to segregate, right? They're my diploid pairs, and my homologous chromosomes separate. So the alleles are going to segregate. And so homologous chromosomes, when they separate into their 4 daughter cells, each cell is going to get their own copy. And each allele for a trait is packaged into a separate gametic cell. So basically what's happening here with this law of segregation is that the alleles don't care where other alleles go. They all separate independently. So this is going to happen during metaphase 1 of meiosis. The alleles are found on different chromosomes. So when the chromosomes separate, the gamete they end up in is going to be due to chance. So Mendel's law of independent assortment was a little bit different. So in this particular case, he was looking at 2 traits, seed color and seed shape. You can see yellow and green, and then this shape. 2 or more genes are going to segregate independently of any other pair during gamete formation. So these are about the actual genes. These are not about the alleles. Non-homologous chromosomes align independently during meiosis. So when these homologous chromosomes line up for meiosis, these don't care how they lined up. So the chromosomes, the non-homologous chromosomes, are independent of one another. And so that will make the genes then separate independently of each other. So different than the law of segregation, where the alleles were separating. And this independent assortment is only going to apply to either genes that are on completely separate chromosomes, or they're on the same chromosome, but they're so far apart, they have a bigger than 50% recombination frequency. They are so far apart that they are not affected by crossing over. Fertilization is also important with our genetics as well. Okay, so fertilization is going to increase the number of chromosomes in the organism. It's going to bring it back to that diploid level. And fertilization is going to be random. And as it restores the diploid number of chromosomes, it does that by this is the time when the male and the female gamete come together. And we get these new combinations of alleles that are going to be present in the zygote. And so the diploid number will get restored. You can see it's back to 46 there. The diploid number gets restored, and I've got an increase in genetic variation because now I'm combining alleles together that I may not have combined before. Okay, so let's look at how we could calculate some of these genotypes and phenotypes and probabilities without necessarily having to draw either giant Punnett squares or a million Punnett squares. Okay, so his laws reflect the same laws that apply when you're tossing a coin. Each coin toss is an independent event. So even though I may have gotten heads 5 times in a row, that still doesn't impact my 6th coin toss. It is not affected by the others. So it is an independent event. And so when I have independent events like that, I can use the multiplication rule when I want to know basically if multiple things are going to happen at the same time. So the example that we have down here, an egg has 1/2 of a chance of carrying a dominant allele and 1/2 of a chance of carrying a recessive allele. The chance of both gametes carrying the recessive allele at fertilization is 1/2 times 1/2. So I want both of those things to happen at the same time. The two events are independent of one another. The probability that the egg has a dominant allele, has a recessive allele, has no impact on the sperm possibly having the recessive allele. And so A and B are both independent. Therefore, I can multiply those probabilities together. And so I only get a probability of 1/4. So now let's look at if I want two things to happen, or if I want something to happen, but I don't care how it happens. Like, for example, I want a dominant allele to be in the finished zygote. Okay, but I only want one. So I could get that dominant allele from an egg, or I could get it from a sperm. And I don't care which one. I just care that there's a dominant allele there. So in that case, then, I'm going to add them together. The probability of getting a heterozygote, okay, I'm going to take my probabilities from the multiplication rule. So if it came from the sperm and I got recessive, if I got dominant from the sperm and recessive from the egg, so 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. And then I could get dominant from the egg, but recessive from the sperm. But again, I don't care how I got the dominant allele. So now I can take those two probabilities and add them together and say there is a 1/2 or 50% chance that I am going to have one dominant allele in this zygote. So we can then use these probability rules to predict inheritance patterns based off the data. So reading what it says there, because each allelic pair segregated independently, multi-character crosses can be thought of as 2 or more independent monohybrids and have the laws applied to them. Okay, neat. You can do a bunch of small monohybrid crosses if you want, and then just use probability rules. That's all that is telling you there. So I've got a cross between 2 pea varieties where the inheritance of 3 characters are being tracked. What fraction of the offspring is predicted to exhibit the recessive phenotypes for 2 of the 3 characters? So let's look at what I've got going on here. I've got a trihybrid, purple flowers, yellow round seeds. So it's trihybrid, so that means it's heterozygous for all traits. So I've got this right here. Big P, big Y, little y, big R, little r. The next one I have is purple flowers. It tells me it's heterozygous. Green wrinkled seeds. And so green and wrinkled are both the recessive trait. So I have to have I have to have my homozygous recessive alleles for both of those. So those are my parents. That's my cross. And this question, again, is asking me, let's go back to the question. It's asking me what fraction of the offspring, it doesn't need to be a decimal, it doesn't need to be a percent. What fraction of the offspring is predicted to exhibit recessive phenotypes for 2 of the 3 characters. So again, it doesn't care which 2. So I need to use both rules of probability here. I have some things that I need to happen at the same time. I need them to be recessive for 2 and dominant for 1. So when I need those to happen, I need them all to happen at the same time. So I need to do multiplication. but then I don't care whether it's the first and second, second and third, first and third. I don't care. Excuse me. So then I will need to add those probabilities together. So let's look at that. So the first thing I have here is I'm taking a look at all my genotypes that would meet the requirements. So I'm recessive for the first two, recessive for first and third, recessive for second and third, recessive for second and third, but a different dominance for the first trait. Or recessive for all three, because it said at least 2 out of 3. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 genotypes that fit this. So the second thing I need to do then is I need to calculate the probability of each of these particular genotypes. And since these genotypes are things that are occurring at the same time, I'm going to need to multiply. So now that I have calculated each individual genotype, now I can add all of these together so that I can see the probability that I get one of them. Again, I don't care which one. So I can add them all together and I end up with 3/8. And so this is where our focus will be a little bit here, kind of how we introduce the genetic variation, what that means, working on some of the math probability. We will not be practicing, once again, bunches and bunches of little monohybrids. The assumption is that you can do those, and if you cannot, you are coming in and getting some practice with that. Okay, so that is where we will be this next class, is practicing this.